Europeans have always erased language. They didn't arrive in silence. They arrived with the intention to silence, because they knew if the land still spoke, it wasn't theirs. If people could still name themselves, they couldn't be owned. If the tongue still carried cosmology, resistance was always possible. So they didn't just burn books. They burned grammars. They didn't just outlaw dialects. They outlawed ways of being. Language was the first casualty of empire. Before contact, there were over 15,000 spoken languages across Earth. Post-contact, 6,000 remain, with over 40% critically endangered, and the vast majority erased by European conquest. This wasn't natural decline. It was linguicide by design. 1492, Columbus arrives. By 1550, Taino, Arawak, Siboney, and 50 other Caribbean languages are extinct. 1562, Diego de Landa burns Maya codices in Mani, Yucatan. He writes his own grammar of the Maya tongue, only after destroying native speakers' access to it. Between the 1830s and 1920s, across British Canada and the US, residential school systems criminalized the use of Ojibwe, Cree, Lakota, Diné, and over 300 native tongues. 1884, Berlin Conference begins. Within decades, over 2,000 African languages are marginalized, declared dialects, or rendered unfit for print. Between 1948 and 1994, apartheid South Africa teaches black children in Afrikaans and English, while criminalizing traditional Bantu languages in state institutions. Today, at least one language dies every 40 days, and most are indigenous, most in places once colonized by Europe. This is not linguistic evolution. It's epistemicide at empire scale. Colonialism required linguistic subjugation. They didn't just want land. They wanted to own the narrative, and that meant controlling the script. In the Americas, Spanish and Portuguese missionaries demanded indigenous children learn Catholic catechisms in Latin, enforced by whips, rations, and isolation. Speaking Nahuatl, Mapudungun, Quechua, Guarani equals punishment. In French West Africa, colonial administrators forced Wolof, Fula, and Bambara speakers to adopt French as the language of civilization by denying native speakers access to courts, jobs, and education unless they complied. In Australia, the 1905 Aborigines Act enabled the government to seize children from multilingual indigenous households, leading to linguistic annihilation of over 250 Aboriginal languages within a century. They didn't translate. They replaced. They didn't learn. They erased. What was erased wasn't just words. It was world-making. Every language killed by Europe contained entire sciences. Nahuatl has dual-rooted verbs that collapse existence and action, meaning who you are is what you do. Yoruba contains tonal shifts, which encode emotion, context, and spiritual alignment. Spoken language as divination system. Ainu of Japan holds no gendered pronouns and prioritizes verbs of transformation over verbs of possession. Walpuri embeds absolute direction, north-south, east-west, in its grammar, so every sentence spoken situates you in space, relative to land. Kalali Sut of Greenlandic Inuit builds entire paragraphs into a single word, merging past, present, conditional, and collective time. An extinct click language of the Kalahari, had a lexicon for animal tracks, cloud formations, soil textures, and migration seasons. Satal Maya includes elevation into all spatial speech. Landscape is not described. It is lived grammatically. These are not just vocabularies. They are living blueprints of memory, ecology, math, agriculture, astronomy, and kinship. When Europe killed the language, they didn't just lose words. They ripped out the knowledge archive. And what they didn't kill, they caged. Ngugi wa Thiong'o was imprisoned by the British-backed Kenyan state for writing a play in Kikuyu. Inuit children in Canadian schools were beaten for speaking Inuktitut, now revitalized only after Canada needed it to claim Arctic sovereignty. France banned Breton, Occitan, Corsican, and Basque in schools until the late 20th century, despite their Indo-European roots, because even European diversity was a threat to the imperial state. The Irish language was nearly eliminated under British rule, surviving only through underground schooling, or Scoula na Scarcha. In 1800, 50% of Ireland spoke Irish. By 1920, it was under 5%. Europe doesn't preserve languages. It withholds them. It museums them. It funds studies on what it refused to fund when it mattered. It grants minority status to what it once labeled barbaric noise. And then they monetized the remains. Endangered language grammars are now datafied by tech giants to train voice recognition and AI translation systems with no consent from the surviving communities. Linguistic researchers publish career-defining dissertations on extinct tongues without offering restitution to the descendants of the speakers. Museums hold audio archives of Indigenous elders recorded in their final years. After decades of forced silence, they destroy the root, then sell the fossil. They called it civilization after they muzzled the world. Europeans didn't just erase languages. They waged a planetary campaign of muting, because the tongue wasn't just a tool, it was a territory. And conquest isn't complete until you rename everything, and no one left remembers the original word. They called it progress. We call it the killing of the breath.